Amy Carmichael's story is ultimately the story of a woman who believed that God's call was worth everything. Through prayer, courage, and faith, she became a powerful instrument of God's mercy for some of the most vulnerable people in the world. Amy Beatrice Carmichael was born on December 16, 1867, in the small village of Millsisle, County Down, in Ireland. Her parents were devoted Christians who raised their children with a strong emphasis on prayer and scripture. From an early age, Amy displayed a sensitive heart and a deep concern for those in need. One story from her childhood illustrates her belief in prayer. Amy once prayed fervently that God would turn her brown eyes blue, believing blue eyes were more beautiful. When the prayer went unanswered, she later reflected that God had known better. Brown eyes would help her blend more naturally among the brown-eyed people of India, whom she would one day serve. Though simple, and learned later in life, God's wisdom often surpasses our understanding, and her plans are greater than our own. Before she went to India, as a young woman, Amy began serving in ministry in Belfast, Ireland, working among poor factory girls known as Shawnees. These young women labored long hours in harsh conditions, often overlooked by society. Amy organized Bible classes and practical support for them, showing them dignity and compassion. Yet even during this work, Amy sensed God's calling her to something beyond the familiar boundaries of home. Her first missionary assignment took her to Japan in 1893. There the work was challenging, and poor health forced her to return home after only a short time. Many might have seen this as the end of her missionary ambitions, but Amy believed God's call was still ahead. In 1895, she traveled to India, where she would spend the rest of her life. When Amy arrived in India, she initially worked under the Christian Missionary Society in southern India. She immersed herself in the local culture, learning the language and adopting Indian dress in order to assimilate with the people she served. It was during these early years that Amy became aware of a heartbreaking reality. Some young girls were being dedicated to temples under a system that often led to lifelong exploitation and abuse. Amy could not ignore what she saw. In 1901, a young girl named Prina fled from a temple and sought refuge with Amy. Protecting the child meant risking conflict with the powerful social and religious systems. But Amy believed the command of Christ was clear: to defend the vulnerable and show love to the oppressed. Soon other children began arriving, some rescued, some fleeing on their own. God was calling her to create a place for them. Amy established a refuge that would eventually become known as the Dawn of Her Fellowship, located in southern India. What began with a single rescued child grew into a community that cared for hundreds. Amy and her co-workers provided not only food and shelter, but also education, spiritual guidance, and a loving family environment. Amy rejected the idea that missionary work should impose Western culture. Instead, she encouraged the children to grow up within their own cultural identity while learning about Christ. The community adopted Indian customs, clothing, and language. The guiding principle of the fellowship was simple: every child should know the love of Christ. But Amy's work did not come without resistance. The system she challenged had powerful defenders. Rescuing children from exploitation sometimes required secrecy and courage. At times, Amy faced threats and legal challenges. Critics accused her of interfering with traditional practices, yet she remained steadfast. Her courage was not fueled by anger at what was being done to the children, but by love, because Amy saw each child not as a problem to solve, but as a soul precious to God. Now, unlike many other missionaries who traveled widely, Amy rarely left the community she founded. She believed that her calling was not to public recognition, but to faithful daily service. In 1931, Amy suffered a serious fall that left her largely bedridden for the remainder of her life. For many people, such an injury would have meant the end of productive work, but Amy continued her ministry in another form. From her room, she wrote books, letters, and devotional reflections that encouraged believers around the world. Over the years, she authored more than 30 books, including Things as They Are, If, and Gold Cord. These writings reveal a deep spiritual life rooted in prayer, scripture, and a profound love for Christ. Over the course of her lifetime, Amy Carmichael helped rescue and raise hundreds of children who might otherwise have faced lives of exploitation. Many of these children later grew up to serve as teachers, caregivers, and Christian workers themselves. The Dawn of Her Fellowship continued long after Amy's death, becoming a lasting testimony to her faith and compassion. Yet Amy never sought recognition for her work. She declined honors and avoided publicity whenever possible. Her desire was simply to obey God. She once wrote, "You can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving." Amy Carmichael passed away on January 18, 1951, after more than 5 decades of service in India. She was buried in Dohnavur, the community she had built and loved. Her legacy continues in several ways. The ongoing work of the Dohnavur Fellowship, her devotional writings still widely read today, and her example of sacrificial Christian service. Amy Carmichael's life reminds us that God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes.